today for this lunchtime webinar. This is going to be a really fun day today. We're going to be chatting a little bit about different themed gardens. So all the way from like certain flower types of gardens to different types of food gardens like salsa, salads, all of those types of things. I'm really excited to chat a little bit about different types of gardens that we've grown too in the past and share with you some ideas. It's going to be really exciting. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Carrie. My husband Dale and I are the creators of the From Seed to Spoon mobile app, which helps walk you through growing your own food. If you guys haven't heard of it, make sure you download it. You need to check it out. It'll help walk you through growing over 100 different fruits, vegetables, and herbs, give you exact planting dates, and walk you through growing all sorts of things. And it's gonna be really great. So let's get started. First of all, I want to make sure everybody can hear me. If you guys can hear me, I would love to see in the chat, you guys pop in, say hi. I would love to see where you guys are all from, where you're watching from. I am here in Zone 7 in Oklahoma City, and the weather here is perfect today. It is absolutely beautiful. I wish I could be doing this from outside because the weather is just perfect today. So a lot of these different themes are getting me really excited for planting out my garden. I was actually working out in the garden today, just doing some weeding and transplanting and all of that. And it's really exciting. Now is the perfect time to get started growing your own food and flowers and herbs and all of that. So I'm super excited. And I hope y'all's weather is as good as it is here. And hi, Katie from Western North Carolina. Nice. Awesome. And then we have South Carolina too. Perfect. I love it. So we'll have people from everywhere. That's great. Okay. So first of all, before we dive in, I wanted to mention, so we have a Wow Wednesday deal at Park Seed every single Wednesday. And I wanted to make sure that I mentioned what it was today for this Wednesday. It is for their lavandula plant, which is 40% off of their regular price. It is absolutely gorgeous. And we are definitely going to be talking about lavender today because lavender is something that works in a lot of different themed gardens too. And then also the Espoma flower fertilizer too is only $7.95, which is an amazing deal. So you need to make sure you check that out too. And I do want to make sure that I mention that we are going to be hosting a giveaway at the end of this webinar, just like we do with every webinar that we do. We host a giveaway. And at the end of it, we will announce the winners. And for this time, we're going to be giving away a free 1-year premium app subscription for From Seed to Spoon. So if you don't already have that app, make sure you download it. There's a QR code up in the corner that you guys can check out. And you can do a lot of things for free on there too. But we do have a premium version of the app too that has some really fun features. So a lucky winner today, make sure you stay to the end, will be getting a 1-year free app subscription. And also one of these lavandula plants too to get started in your garden. Okay, so first of all, I do want to mention one of the biggest reasons why I love themed gardens is because you can really pick whatever it is that you want to do. So if you are looking for something specific that you want to eat, like a salsa, salads, certain herbs, like maybe you want to make your own Italian seasonings or things like that. Or if you were looking for a pollinator attracting garden or something like that to bring in all these beautiful butterflies and dragonflies, things like that. So you can pick so many different things and there's so many different themes you can go through too. And one thing too I did want to mention is one thing that people tend to do is grow for health a lot. So if you have any sort of certain health conditions, I'm not going to be going into details today on certain things to grow for different health conditions, but I did want to make you guys aware that there is a filter in the app where you can go through and see what specific plants work really well for certain health conditions. So things like diabetes, if you're looking for weight loss plants, or iron deficiency, things like that. And you can click through and it'll show you all the different plants. So if you're looking for something like that as a theme, you can go through and check that out on the app as well. So, first of all, I wanted to dive in with one of my very favorites, which is the Salsa Garden. I am doing the Salsa Garden this year. I am super excited. And if you guys haven't been watching our YouTube, make sure you check it out. I absolutely love that we've been meeting with a bunch of different zones and people from all across the country, and everybody's growing their own salsa in their garden. So it's really fun. And a salsa garden is something that I feel like is really good for beginners as well, because a lot of these are some beginner friendly plants. And a lot of the times with salsas, a concern, I know, fear, everybody always is terrified of growing their own tomatoes. But really, if you choose the right variety for your area, you can really be successful with tomatoes. And if you are a beginner too, and you haven't had much luck in the past, I always recommend doing something like a cherry tomato, something a little bit smaller maybe. And even with that, you can chop it up and use it in a salsa too. But sometimes they're just a little bit easier to grow, to harvest, because they're smaller. So I recommend growing some cherry tomatoes if you're a beginner. Um, if not, I mean, you can definitely do both types of tomatoes. I love all kinds. They're great. So this year I'm growing in my salsa garden. I'm doing both a cherry tomato as well as a Parks Whopper tomato, which is a huge vining one. It's exciting. And I love Roma. Yep, Katie, wow, she popped up. Romas are super easy as well. Yes, absolutely. I was just about to recommend Romas. That is probably one of my favorites to grow. Roma and also the Parks Whopper, along with pretty much any sort of cherry variety. Um, there is a chocolate cherry variety that I love for no reason other than it's called chocolate cherry, and the kids love it. They think it's just the coolest thing ever, that I'm like, oh, let's go harvest some chocolate cherry, the chocolate cherry tomatoes, and they love it. Um, so I absolutely love the Roma tomatoes, any sort of Parks Whopper and cherry tomatoes. Those are all fantastic ones to add into your salsa garden. And what I'm doing with this, whenever I'm planting out my salsa garden, I'm doing the Roma tomato in the center of one of these huge round raised beds. And then on the sides, I'm going to be adding some of these other plants. So I'm going to be growing some peppers as well. And I'm going to be doing some jalapenos, some traditional jalapenos for the salsa, and then some sweet peppers too. You can do any sort of like banana pepper or bell pepper. All of those are really good in the salsa. So, and it really just depends on how hot you want your salsa to be, because there are super spicy peppers out there. And there's also super like sweet ones. So you can make your salsa as unique as you want to. You can make it as sweet or as spicy as you want to, which is great. So I'm doing one of both. I'm doing a jalapeno and also a sweet one too. And then I'm also going to be growing some chives around the outside, just because I got a little bit of a late start with the onions. So I went with chives because they're super similar. But onions, if you still have time to plant them, would be fantastic in a salsa garden. And they are a great companion plant too, and a good border plant. So what I like to do is plant like some onions around the side to kind of like repel the pests. Because they have such a strong smell, the pests don't really want to get to the onions. So they'll just come up to it and be like, nope, don't like that, and go away. So I tend to, whenever I'm planting out these round raised beds, I do onions like all around in the circle around it, just as my guard. And then I also have some other guards in there too. I have some marigolds, which is not necessarily to eat, but you can, which is great, but it's not necessarily for me to eat. It is more for protecting my tomatoes and peppers and all of that. Same as the basil. The basil is super amazing. You can definitely add basil into your salsa, but it's also an amazing companion plant, and it'll make your tomatoes and peppers even taste better, which is awesome. So I always grow basil and marigolds together with my tomatoes and peppers. And then I also have some cilantro that I'm going to be doing. Now, a consideration that you need to have for cilantro, even though cilantro is pretty much a staple in any salsa garden, right? It is a cool season crop, technically, whereas everything else is warm season. So it makes it a little bit more challenging. So what I'm doing in my salsa garden is I have Park has this long-standing cilantro, which is a super strong bolting resistant variety, and I'm going to have that on the side where it can be on the side of the tomatoes where it'll get shade in the afternoon. So that way, in the heat of the day, it's not going to get quite as hot as the other plants. And I have a variety that's going to be withstanding the temperatures, hopefully. And hopefully, I will have good success by doing that. I had this cilantro planted for me last year, and I definitely noticed a huge difference by that variety versus other varieties. So salsa gardens are awesome. And I did mention earlier too that I was doing that ultimate salsa challenge. And if you haven't been watching our YouTube, please make sure you follow along. It is super fun. I post videos pretty much every other week or whenever there's something going on with my plants. And I do updates too from my zone 7, and then I include the different zones as well. So everywhere from, I think we have from zone 6 to 10, which is awesome. So everybody's doing their own unique things, and we're all sharing how we're growing our salsas, what's different in the different growing zones, how our growing methods are slightly different, and it's amazing. So make sure you check them out if you haven't yet. And we should be having new updates coming out really soon. I bring them out like every other Saturday, and I think this Saturday should be a update day. So make sure you're paying attention. Okay, another type of theme that's out there is a culinary herb garden. So this is one that we do a lot of because we love to grow herbs. We are a huge herb collector, and a lot of these are amazing and super great, easy for beginners to grow. And we have some rosemary, which is probably one of my favorites. Rosemary, some thyme, and then sage, oregano, and basil are the ones that I put all together. Now, there are definitely other herbs you can use too. I just paired all these together because I really love a lot of these, especially like the ones on top, the rosemary, thyme, and sage. And oregano too. I find that a lot of these will survive through the winter here. Now, not all the time. Now, rosemary most of the time will survive if I have a hardy variety. And typically, I get the ARP variety for rosemary, and it survives really well for me here in Zone 7. And I've had really good success with that as well with thyme. Like I've had really good success with thyme, and thyme is gorgeous. If you haven't ever grown thyme, I love planting it, and and like it just spills over, and it can really take over because it just grows and spreads so beautiful, super pretty. Pollinators love it. You will get lots of beneficials, and also for the sage too. You'll get lots of beneficials coming in and checking out your garden. The only one in here that definitely won't be surviving through the winter is going to be basil. And I mean, unless you are in a tropical environment or bringing it inside. But yeah, basil's just one that'll be in the warm season. The other ones, though, should be surviving through the winter, depending on where you live. It does where I live. So that's awesome. Okay, next, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these unique ones. So, the cottage flower garden. This is one that gets brought up a lot, and I really love unique and beauty of a lot of these flowers. And so we have some poppies and cosmos, sweet peas, delphinium, and roses. So these ones, you just have to be careful about how you arrange them because all of these plants will have very similar sun requirements. They all want full sun, typically at least 6 to 8 hours. They like well draining soil. They like to have consistent moisture. And these ones will do really well for you. So you just need to make sure that you arrange them in a way where they can get all of the sun that they need. So things like the sweet peas are going to be vining. So you want to make sure that the sweet peas are going to be like in the back where they won't be blocking the sun from hitting all of your other plants. And same with roses, because most roses are going to be trellising and they'll be larger, and the delphinium are going to be pretty large, tall, spiky plants. Sometimes you need to brace them too, just because they do get so tall, which is awesome. And they are beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. But things like the cosmos and the poppies, you can put those in the front and let them just take over the front area, and they won't grow too big or tall to shade out anything else. So those ones are really good additions too. And all of these, I did want to make sure that I mention that all of these are going to be ones that are going to perform better for you if you do go about deadheading them whenever you have like a spent flower. So whenever you have a flower that's wilting or has died, if you just trim that one off, you'll do a lot better in the future, and you'll have more flowers that will come after the fact, and they'll do really well if you continue to deadhead these plants. And then I constantly am getting comments about deer all of the time. So I wanted to make sure that I focused in on deer resistant gardens. And I actually did two different types of deer resistant gardens. I did an edible and also a flower one. So I wanted to focus in a little bit on there are a few certain plants that you can grow that deer don't typically like to eat. Now, I won't say they never will, because deer are crazy like that. Like, I feel like you will, yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about deer here after the fact, but deer are definitely difficult to handle. But there are some plants that they just don't really like, and they will definitely go for other things before they hit these. So now these are mostly going to be, so things like the Swiss chard and kale are going to be cool season ones. So those aren't going to be ones that you can really grow in the summer. But the rosemary, oregano, and thyme, those are ones that once you plant them out, I typically recommend planting those ones still in like the springtime, but they will last you throughout the summer. So things like that, deer will typically avoid because they don't really like the pungent smells, things like that. So they'll typically avoid those ones. And then we have the ornamental ones that I had to include here. We have the salvia, bee balm, yarrow, coneflower, lavender. These ones are all really, really beautiful plants that will really thrive well, and hopefully the deer will avoid them. They at least will go for these last in your garden for sure, because they are not fans of them. Now, the difference with these ones, now not all of these like the same growing conditions. So things like the salvia and the yarrow and lavender too, those ones typically don't like a lot of moisture. So it's really important, again, to have the well draining soil. But those three, especially, you don't really want to do a lot of watering. They like to have periods where they dry out, and then you give them a lot of water, and then let it happen again. Let them dry out, and then give them a lot of water. And then that's how they thrive. They hate sitting in moist soil. They don't like having what they call their feet wet, which is their roots. So they will thrive by having periods of dry and then giving them water thoroughly. And then bee balm and coneflower, those ones are ones that are going to do good with well draining, moist soil, and absolutely going to be beautiful for you, as well as bringing in loads and loads of pollinators and beneficial insects and all of that. They're absolutely incredible. And these ones are definitely ones that I would recommend planting if you have a deer issue, because the deer tend to avoid these flowers. Now, I did want to mention a little bit more about deer while we were on the topic. Now, if you guys weren't aware, we do have a part of the app. Whenever you pull up the app, the From Seed to Spoon app, and if you go to the pest section or critters section and look under pests for deer and you pull it up, it'll pull up all of the organic methods that you can go about handling. And it'll have a whole bunch of different pest issues. So, like aphids, cucumber beetles, squash bugs, all sorts of things. So, deer are on there too, because they are definitely a force to be reckoned with. And deer are something that, I mean, really the only 100% tried and true thing to keep them out is having a fence. Um, and when I say having a fence, I mean having a tall fence, because if you've been around deer before, you know that they can leap fences. They can go above like 8-foot fence. Well, 6 foot. But yeah, so having an 8-foot fence would be very safe. Something else that I've seen people do as well, if they have a shorter fence, is run like a fishing line across the just above it, and having, so if they jump into it, it scares them and they're like, whoa, what was that? But there are other things to do if building a fence isn't something you can do. You can, again, plant the things that we talked about before. And then you can also try different things like having a motion activated sprinkler in there. So if it detects motion, the sprinkler will shoot off a stream in kind of erratic form, and it'll scare the deer off. And then there's also different, like leaving different scents around, like bone meal. Some people, like if they get a haircut, they put their hair across all around the garden. So that way, like they smell human. So they don't really want to go in and around that area. So there's just a bunch of different unique things that you can go about helping to prevent deer from coming in, if you wanted to be growing other things besides just the deer resistant gardens too. Oh, I saw Rhonda just posted a question. What about chimes in the garden to scare them? Yes, I have definitely heard that chimes will help with deer, as well as like those, oh, I don't remember what they're called, but those things like you can get at like the dollar store where you stick them in the ground and they twirl. They don't necessarily make noise, but they like twirl and make all sorts of pretty lights. I'm sure somebody can pop in the name in chat of what they're called. But yeah, so anything that makes noise or sounds, reflections, things like that can help to scare them off. And things like that too help with other pests too, like birds and things like that. Okay, next we have the pollinator attracting garden. So this is probably one of my favorites. Oh, we went one too far. There we go. Back to the pollinator. Yeah, this is probably one of my favorites because I plant a lot of plants out in the garden just for this reason of attracting pollinators into the garden. And of course, they're really pretty too. Have to admit that. But my very favorite, of course, is going to be the zinnia. And there are so many different varieties of zinnia, especially at Park. They have these like Cinderella zinnias, which are so beautiful. I absolutely love them. And they have so many different unique blooms and colors. And oh, they're so beautiful. Don't get me started on zinnias. They're the best. I love them. But zinnias will really work to bring in all sorts of different pollinators. And probably my favorite thing about zinnias too is once you plant them once, you will typically have them coming back every year, because now not all the time, but a lot of the time, like the zinnias that we plant, once they go to seed. If we let them go to seed instead of deadheading each and every one. So at the end of the season, we just let them go to seed and they drop the seeds into the ground. The next spring, we'll notice we have lots of zinnias coming up already, like where those zinnias were planted before. So it's amazing. So it's almost like we have our own little wildflower zinnia patch, which is great. So I love having all sorts of different colors and varieties of the zinnias. It's amazing. Um, Another one of my favorites is bee balm. I know I talked a little bit about it previously before, but bee balm is probably one of my favorite unique flowers, just because, like, I mean, you can see it right there. It's so pretty, but it is um, constantly has a bunch of different like bees and butterflies, all of that around it. I mean, it is definitely aptly named bee balm because it has bees and butterflies and all sorts of things all the time around it. So it's great. And then chives. I know chives isn't one that people typically think about as a pollinator attracting one, but it definitely is, especially once they go to flower. They have these really, really beautiful little purple flowers, sometimes white flowers, sometimes a pinkish color too. It just kind of depends on what variety of chives you have. Um, but I love having these flowers, and the pollinators love them too. And we can actually eat them too. So it's not like the plant is going to waste at this point. I let them go and flower, and then I harvest the flowers too, and I eat the flowers too. So I love having chive flowers out there to bring in beneficials as well as to eat. So it works out perfect. Best of both worlds. And then sage is absolutely great. And all sorts of different types of sage can be really helpful in bringing in all sorts of pollinators. So this one right here is a pineapple sage. And that's my personal favorite. And that's the one that I see all of the butterflies on. They just absolutely love the pineapple sage. But there's also different culinary sages and things like that that you can eat also, that the bees especially love, and all sorts of different pollinators will be flocking to that one as well. So these are really great plants right here that'll help bring in insects as well as have other purposes for you too. It's great. And then the pizza garden. This is probably my kids' favorite right here. They love making their own pizza. It is so much fun. Of course, the first thing when growing your own pizza garden is going to be the tomatoes, right? This is for the tomato sauce. Um, so I love doing tomatoes and then garlic and onions. Again, I do those garlic and onions on the outsides because just like the onions, I know we talked a little bit about onions being a guard. Garlic is exactly the same way. Now, I will say a consideration that you need to have for planting garlic out is that you do need to plant garlic in the fall because garlic is one that needs to have a freeze. It needs to get really cold in order for it to do really well for you. So if you didn't get a chance to plant it in the fall, not all is lost. Like there are things you can do to try and trick it. So things that we've done in the past is like get a like a gallon size Ziploc baggie, put a bunch of soil in there, along with the garlic that you are going to be planting out, and put it in the freezer for a few weeks. And then it'll kind of trick it into thinking that it went through a freeze. And then you can pull that out and plant it in the spring. So it's not going to go quite as well as if you planted it out in the fall, but it is a great way to go about actually having garlic in the spring if you wanted to plant it in the spring. You get it in the summer. So that's a great way to go about tricking it and still having some garlic for you. So not all is lost if you didn't plant it last fall. You can still plant it today if you want to. And then, of course, different seasonings, things like oregano and basil. Those ones are amazing. Now, I could have put countless different herbs right here. I mean, pretty much everything that's in Italian seasonings, I could have put down on this one, but I just touched on a few of my favorite ones for pizzas and the kids' favorite ones. These are the most common ones that we put on our pizzas. And yeah, so I love this. The kids love having a pizza garden, having everything in one place. So if we are going about making a pizza that night, it's all in one place. And salad garden, of course, you have to grow a salad garden. I feel like at least that we do. We love having different greens and different types of greens for salads. So that's why I put several different types of greens. I have spinach and kale and lettuce on here, even some arugula if you like a little bit of a bite to your salads. I love all these. I personally even love doing Swiss chard in my salads too. So, I mean, again, this is not the be all and end all list. It just gives you an idea of where to start. So, doing some sort of different variety of different greens just to get some different flavors and textures and uniqueness into your salad, just to make it a little bit more fun. And then also, I put on here too some carrots, which is absolutely amazing in salads, and cucumbers. I love growing, especially like the mini cucumbers. Again, you will need to have a trellis for these cucumbers to climb up. So make sure you keep that in mind, that it is going to be one that is climbing. They get pretty large unless you do a patio variety. They have certain smaller varieties that you can do that won't grow quite as large for you. So if you have a smaller space, you might want to look into some of those. I know Park has several different smaller varieties for cucumbers. And then, of course, cherry tomatoes are amazing, especially for your salads, because you don't even necessarily have to chop them up. You can just pop them off, drop them into your salad just as is. Makes it super amazing. Now, I will say the consideration that you need to have for these ones is these greens right here are all going to be cool seasons, and the carrots are cool season crops, whereas the cucumber and tomatoes are going to be warm season. So, what I try to do is try to catch it on both ends. And again, try and do kind of what I was talking about earlier with the cilantro. Try and have some of these greens and the carrots in the shade for the afternoon. So that way they'll last a little bit longer into the season. So if I put them on the side where of the cherry tomatoes or the cucumber plant with that trellis, and where it will block the sun for them for the afternoon, they will last a lot longer for you. And then I'll typically try and push them and keep them cool and moist so as long as I can. And that hopefully that'll do really well for you. And then if you did want to try a different variety, there are things too, like Malabar spinach that you can grow in the summer. So it just has a little bit different flavor than regular spinach and lettuce and all of that. It's going to have its own unique flavor, but it is a green that you can grow and eat in the summer, that you can grow along with your tomatoes and cucumbers and all of that if you wanted to try something a little bit different in the heat of the summer. Okay, so I did want to mention too, if you guys have any questions or if you want to know about like certain varieties, I know I do this all the time. I pull up our From Seed to Spoon app, and in the bottom corner, there is a Growbot section, and it will pull up our AI guy here, and he in Growbot will answer any questions. So I ask Growbot like certain things like what is the best tomato variety for my area, and it will give me recommendations on certain varieties that are really great for our area, and it'll pull up certain recommendations for you as well. So if you guys haven't played with Growbot yet, you definitely need to check that out, because Growbot will give you some really great advice and will give you really great helpful tips and all of that. Okay, Andrew, do we have any questions that pop up real quick? Does anybody have any questions before we go to the giveaway winner, or is everybody really excited too about that? Okay, Wendy. She says, I have planted rosemary in my biodome without germination luck. Is it best to direct sow seeds? Okay, so I will say, Wendy, that rosemary is extremely difficult to start. It is one of those seeds that is going to be challenging to get started. It definitely needs to have the perfect growing conditions. But if you're growing in your biodome, that should be the perfect growing conditions. I would say having it in your biodome is the best thing for you. I might try like spraying the top parts of them just to make sure that the top parts are staying moist instead of just the bottom. Now you might need to be concerned about like other things like mold issues, but you'll get that later after the fact. But hopefully if you stop doing that after they get germinated, you'll be good. But I would definitely recommend starting them indoors versus outdoors, just so you can keep a closer eye on them. And if that doesn't work, I mean, honestly, propagating is going to be your best bet. So if you already have some rosemary out there, I'd take cuttings from a rosemary plant that you have and try just taking that, because that'll do a lot better for you. Okay, Rhonda. Yes, we actually chatted a little bit about this earlier about chimes in the garden to scare off the deer. Yes, absolutely. I would definitely say that chimes, as well as like anything that makes noise or sounds, bright lights, something flashy, things like that, would really help to scare away the deer. Let's see. Katie, what's the harvest ratio of each of your themed gardens? Well, I'm not sure exactly what harvest ratio what you're asking about. Um, yeah, I'm not sure the best way to answer your questions, like which theme you're looking at and how much of yeah. So I will say if you are looking to get a huge amount of harvest, I would do things more like the cherry tomatoes will give you a whole bunch of harvest. Any sort of herbs will give you a really good harvest as well, too, because they will continue to grow and keep growing too. Same with the greens. I mean, really, a lot of the plants we talked about today will give you a really good harvest. Okay. Well, great. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We have a winner. It is Katie P. Congratulations, Katie P. You have won the 1-year premium app subscription, as well as the Wow Wednesday deal, which is awesome. So, Katie, what you need to do is send us a email at info@seedtospoon.net. Andrew, if you want to pop up that text for our info, oh, I see it. Okay. Yeah, so if you want to send us an email right there, and we can get you hooked up and get you your subscription and all of your free goodies. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. I look forward to seeing you guys all in the next one. We typically have our webinars every couple weeks. We typically do them every 2 weeks, and around this time frame, we like to do it'll be around the lunchtime for the next couple. Yeah, so I look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Thank you all for joining today. Bye.